Welcome to the Couch Scouts Podcast. We provide league-winning analysis, advice, and tools to help you dominate your league and build a dynasty. Scout, draft, win. Here's your host, Matt Cooper.
Welcome to the Couch Scouts Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cooper. With me is my co-host, Matt Rupert.
How's it going?
And Matt Jackson.
What's going on?
And this week we are going to be talking about some NFL preseason news, training camp, kind of there's a lot of noise this time of year. All right. A lot of news coming out. What do we need to pay attention to? What would we be better off just ignoring? How do we filter all that through? And so we got you guys covered and really excited to hit that this week. Before we jump into the show, just wanted to give you guys a quick update. We have been teasing the website on this show for, I guess, about a month now, as we've been working on it all summer, getting it ready for you guys. We are really excited, and we have a launch date. So September 5th. That is the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of our first podcast episode. It also coincides with week 1 of the NFL season. And that's the date that we're going to be launching our website. So we're really, really excited about that. There's going to be membership options for you guys to get some extra content. We're going to be highlighting more of that over the coming month as we prepare for that launch. But there's going to be a film room. There's going to be extra podcast episodes. There's going to be merch, all kinds of good stuff. And we're really, really excited to get that out to you guys. So with that being said, let's jump into the show topic tonight. And like I mentioned before, we're just going to be breaking down the noise and just reacting, really giving our takes. We're going to go kind of news item by news item and kind of say, are we buying it? Are we selling it? Do we think you should be paying attention? Do we think you should be ignoring it, disbelieving it, whatever the case may be? So let's jump into it. And Jackson, Rupert, before we get to our first news item, do you guys have any overarching thoughts on just how you filter through this stuff, how you decide what to believe and what not to believe?
Yeah, for me, I mean, when it comes to like these incoming rookies, because I think a large majority of what we're going to talk about tonight, there's some incoming rookies or rookies in the NFL that are making some splashes. One of the things that I like to kind of at least set the stage for when it comes to NFL training camp news is everybody looks good versus air, right? We've all heard that saying before. Anybody can look good versus air. And in the preseason, you're going to hear a bunch of noise and everybody is going to look good. So you kind of have to filter it. I filter it by price. What is their ADP price? If they look good in training camp and their ADP price is low, hey, that's something to pay attention to, right? If they're a rookie that we liked, according to our rookie guide, and we spent hours scouting in the offseason and they're looking good in training camp, that's something to pay attention to. In the case of one guy we're going to talk about tonight, if they're doing something that we haven't seen them do before, and they look like to be vastly improved in a certain area, yeah, that's something to pay attention to too. So I think you can't just take everything that you hear, right? You got to filter it by what you've seen already and kind of make that decision yourself.
For sure.
Yeah,
Rupert, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, you can't overreact too much to it, especially, if you've watched 8+ games of game tape of the player. You're not going to completely flip on your evaluation based on, plays against air, right? Or just horrible training camp hype videos where a guy's catching a hitch route that went 2 yards. So just like don't overreact too much. And if it's something like Jackson alluded to, like maybe a particular area of weakness that we would like to see improved, if they're showing that improvement in training camp, then that's something that I pay attention to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's so hard this time of year because if you go back even a year ago, right, there were consistent highlights and hype coming out of training camp almost every day about Quentin Johnston. With no pads on, he was out there making the one-handed catches away from his body, not basket catching. And I remember specifically because my evaluation of him was to fade him, and I had a lot of concerns. And there were so many people dunking on social media with the training camp highlights going, "Oh, I was told he couldn't catch. Oh, I thought he had no hands." And they were taking these super early victory laps. You got to be careful with that. But at the same time, if you were paying attention last year, there was a consistent drumbeat of hype for Puka Nacua.
Mhm.
And if you had been paying attention to that, it wasn't too late. If you wanted to go buy Puka Nacua at this time last year, before he had his first 17 target game or whatever in NFL week 1, you could have probably bought him pretty easily for a second round pick at this point last year. So it is kind of a more of an art than a science in terms of figuring out what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. And so with that being said, let's just get into the specific topics and we'll give our takes on each of these. So starting off, a guy that, as Panthers fans, Rupert and I would love for this guy to be awesome. Our rookie guide, we did not think he was awesome. We wanted to fade him pretty hard at cost. I personally don't have any shares on my dynasty teams, and I'm kind of wishing that I had a few after the training camp hype. Xavier Legette, he's looked just like a much improved route runner in training camp. I think that's been the most notable thing to me, is that our concern on tape was he's not running routes. He's not separating against man, against press coverage. And that, was pretty consistent across a lot of analysts, not just us. Matt Harmon had him at a 19th percentile success rate versus both man and press coverage. But the clips coming out of camp pretty much every day, it looks like he's just routing people up. It's like, where was this on the college tape? He's getting open, he's creating separation, he looks twitchy. His technique looks way more advanced than anything I saw in college. And so I'm intrigued, but I want to hear what you guys think. Are you guys buying a few shares of Xavier Legette to kind of hedge your bets?
So I ended up scooping up 2 or 3 shares of Leggett just based on the fact that I was able to get him at like the back end of the second round in some drafts. And I was just like, that's just too good a value. And, our real knock on him was route running. Like, he has the athleticism, he has the contested catch ability, he has solid hands, and he has the athletic ability to be able to run routes. He just really had to work on technique. And it seems like he really took that to heart. There's some interviews with him this offseason that he went down and specifically worked with a wide receiver route running coach this offseason. And he said that was the number one criticism he got from teams. So it's not just us again, as you said. And so he really wanted to work on that. And it seems like he's taking the right approach. And he does look like a different route runner than what we saw on tape at South Carolina. So it's really encouraging. I don't know if I'm going to – I may peek around at it and see, but I got a feeling with all this hype, he's probably going to be too much for me to buy right now. So I'll probably just stick with the 2 or 3 shares I have currently.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, right? I mean, I don't want to throw away the hours that we spent scouting him. Like, yes, he is getting better, but there was still some concern, and I'm glad that he's improving in it. And honestly, he's one of those guys that you want to root for, right? Like, every time you see a video of him doing an interview, like it's hard not to root for the guy. But my favorite is all the people on Twitter that are now coming out, right, and saying, well, if you were watching, he could do this all along. Like, no, if you were watching, like this was a problem pretty consistently. So I'm looking at the price, as Rupert said, just to hedge bets a little bit. A guy that he really reminds me of, not so much in like gameplay, but just like the criticisms, right? If you guys were scouting DK Metcalf back in the day, he had the size, he had the speed. The one knock on him was, hey, he doesn't run routes very well. Well, he turned that around in the NFL, and now he's a pretty solid route runner. He's a good wide receiver to have on your dynasty roster. So maybe Legette can turn it around and be that kind of guy. I don't know. It's still up in the air, but I'm intrigued to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, it's like you said, Jackson, you don't want to throw out all your hours of scouting, but I do think it's worth noting we're not just seeing like quotes from a coach saying, oh, he's looked great or whatever. We're actually seeing video clips technically of him going out and doing the things that we did not see in college.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to be open to being, maybe I was wrong on this guy, or maybe he's developed. And, you can't just have take lock. And so I don't currently have any shares, and I would be open to acquiring some shares. Maybe even if not now because of all the training camp hype, maybe we get into the season. Sometimes it takes rookies time to get going. Doing something on the practice field is not the same as being ready to do it in a game. And so just because we're seeing some nice flashes in practice doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see it translate to immediate production on the football field. I even saw the first unofficial depth chart had Mingo starting over Leggett. He's dealing with a little bit of a foot injury as well. And so it might be that right now is not the time to buy, but early in the season, when there's not that immediate gratification, that might be the time to try to swoop in and see, can I get him for a 2025 second? Because I am intrigued by some of what I've seen. But yeah, let's move on. So the news out of Colts training camp is that Josh Downs and Adonai Mitchell are turning heads. Are we buying into the price tag for Richardson with this news? And which of these two guys, Josh Downs versus Adonai Mitchell, are you interested in buying, if either?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with the latter question. It's Adonai Mitchell for me all day. I mean, it was Adonai Mitchell in rookie drafts. I mean, you talk about a guy that was going in the mid-second round. I mean, talent was never Adonai Mitchell's issue. It was his work ethic. And I mean, if he could get that cleaned up, he could be one of the better receivers in the draft. And we all noted that in the rookie guys. So it's definitely Adonai Mitchell for me for talent alone. I'm still a little weary of just the price tag for Anthony Richardson. I mean, you look at it, and the guy, I mean, his price tag is what, QB7, I believe, and he's going in the late first round. So I mean, that's something that I'm a little worried about, right? When it comes to his price tag, a guy that was injured for the most part of last year, you didn't really see him get going, and he's still a back into the first round ADP price. I mean, that's pricey for somebody that we don't know can quite develop as a passer yet.
What about you, Rupert?
Again, I'm going to be buying Adonai. I really like Josh Downs. Loved him last year. I just think his ceiling's kind of capped, being that I don't really see him as the biggest, red zone target earner. But for PPR purposes, I think he'll be a really solid player. But the upside with Mitchell is just too high, in my opinion. And I agree that Richardson, his ceiling's QB1, but it's also QB34 because he's injured and doesn't really play this season. So at that price tag, I'm probably going to be out on him. I got a couple of shares on some rebuilds where I traded away some better quarterbacks to try and go young. But that's probably the only shares I'll end up with.
Yeah, I don't think I hate Richardson's price tag quite as much as you guys, just because I think people are always going to be tantalized by Richardson. So even if he doesn't ball out as much as everybody thinks, like, there's still going to be a market probably for years to come to sell him. He's got a lot of insulated job security. He's still with Shane Steichen, who developed Jalen Hurts as a passer. The offense could not be more loaded in terms of talent and weapons. And so, yes, there's risk, and I don't like whiffing, when I'm taking somebody that high in a startup draft. But I do think that in the right situation, I would make that selection. Like if I'm on the board at, 8th pick or whatever, and I don't know, let's say it's between him and Justin Herbert or Jordan Love or what, let's say that like Lamar and Hurts and Mahomes, like all the really proven studs are off the board. I like Richardson a lot. I think, just the upside for him to be as good as he can be for fantasy at his age is tremendous. And I love the supporting cast. As far as the other two guys, I like Downs a lot. I loved him. He was in my top 3, I believe, last year, at least pre-draft. I might have dropped him after he fell to the 3rd round, but I do think he's going to continue to be heavily involved in this offense. I think he had a great rookie season. The news out of camp, it's weird because if you watch the video clips, there are some jaw-dropping clips of Adonai Mitchell just running filthy routes, making ridiculous catches. Like he looks like a star at certain moments, But if you hear the coach speak coming out of what they're doing, they say it's still up for grabs. He's battling with Alec Pierce for the wide receiver 3 role on the team, which is just interesting to hear because we know Alec Pierce is just a guy, right? But Adonai could be so much more than that. But it's like that's a quote that I'm not going to believe it because I see Adonai out there dominating in practice, and I know who Alec Pierce is. So you talk about hype to ignore versus hype to pay attention to. I'm ignoring the narrative that Adonai Mitchell may lose snaps to Alec Pierce. But I would say I'm buying and paying attention to the narrative that Josh Downs might be the clear number 2, and he might be heavily underrated in fantasy right now, and he might be a good buy. So let's move on to kind of our next news topic here. And that is Chase Brown. He is reportedly earning more first-team reps for the Bengals than Zach Moss, and looking like the running back to own for that team with the Bengals. And so is that something that you guys are paying attention to? Are you interested in Zach Moss, Chase Brown, neither, both? Where are you guys at with this?
I think it's going to be more of a 50-50 split than what it looked like coming into the season. I feel like when they brought in Zach Moss, it seemed like he was going to be more heavily involved, and Chase Brown would just be kind of a change of pace. And it definitely seems like it's more 50-50 now. They listed Zach Moss as RB1 on their depth chart. So I'm still probably going to lean him because we've seen it more. And, I'll probably try and scoop up a share or two or get both of them just in case of injury. They're going to be on a high-powered offense. So I really like those 2 options.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think personally, Chase Brown was a player that I liked last year. There was a lot of people that had concern. His pass protection was terrible. He just wasn't the most physical back, but he was explosive and he had some pretty fun tape. Obviously fell to day 3, but Mixon's out of town. Chase Brown showed some flashes. I think I even saw a quote from one of the offensive linemen with the Bengals that if he was playing fantasy football, Chase Brown would be the first running back he would take, which is an interesting statement to make. I don't know if I buy that, but I mean, he didn't say Zach Brown. He said Chase Brown or Zach Moss. Sorry, Zach Moss, Chase Brown. He said Chase Brown is the guy that he would take. So anyway, if I was going to throw a late round dart on one of these guys, I would throw it on Chase Brown. I'm kind of with you, Rupert. I think it's going to be a timeshare and not one that is going to be overly exciting for fantasy on either account. Let's move on. And Jackson, I want to get your take on this next one. So Jameson Williams is getting some attention in the first few weeks of camp. Is this the year that Jameson Williams finally puts it together?
I find it so hard to believe that this is, I mean, don't we see this every year? I mean, doesn't Jameson Williams look really good every single year? And then it comes to the season and he's just a go route specialist running wind sprints and taking the top off the defense. I mean, that team has so many mouths to feed. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to get his targets. Sam Laporte is going to get his targets. They've got playmakers on the team. And as much as I love Jameson Williams coming out of college, we were like, if we can just get over that injury, that ACL that he had, he's going to do big things. We haven't seen that translated. I mean, we saw he normally has 1 or 2 big catches a game, and then he kind of disappears, or 1 or 2 big catches a season, and then kind of disappears the rest of the season. I'm not buying it personally. I've been burned by Jameson Williams last year, and I don't know. I feel like this is more the same cycle that we see every single year when it comes to this guy.
Yeah, I'll give maybe a little bit more optimistic outlook because, I mean, I would love for him to be a breakout.
I love it too.
Year. I mean, he was my wide receiver 2 in that draft class behind Garrett Wilson, but ahead of guys like Drake London and Chris Olave. So that has looked like a big miss for me. Probably safe to say it is a big miss for me. But Yeah, I love the guy's talent. It is, if there was ever going to be an excuse, because normally if a guy hasn't produced by this point in his career, I'm kind of like, I'm over it. If there was ever a situation between the ACL and the suspension and all of that, this would be it, right? I mean, he's got plenty of built-in reasons why it hasn't happened for him. The hesitation is there's so many mouths to feed in that offense. I think he's at best the third target earner on his own team. But he is explosive. He did start to show some signs at the end of last year. The shares that I still have, I'm holding, but I'm not actively buying any more shares of it. So let's continue along here. One more before we take a break here at the middle of the show. But the reports are that Ladd McConkey looks like the wide receiver one for the Chargers. And if you've been paying attention to this show for any amount of time, that probably doesn't come as a surprise to you.
Ladd McConkey stands.
we love Ladd McConkey on this show and have been saying he's probably going to be the Chargers wide receiver one ever since he got drafted there. So I don't think I really need to ask, but Rupert, are you buying or selling this hype?
Buying it all. I'm trying to get some more shares. It's a perfect situation for him to go to the Chargers, and it seems like he's just, taking the opportunity by the horns and grabbing that wide receiver one spot, and you'll have to see it.
Yeah, man. I mean, Josh Palmer, he's probably going to be a usable asset for your fantasy team this year, but he's a Jag, and Quentin Johnston is just not it. You see new drops coming out of practice every single day. It seems like he's may not even win the wide receiver 3 job there. So he's no threat to Ladd McConkey. So yeah, I think Ladd McConkey steps in day one, number one target with a great quarterback. Hopefully the only, slight concern is Justin Herbert. Seems like he's banged up and not coming into the year fully healthy. He's going to miss some time in a boot, but they say he should be ready for week 1. So Ladd McConkey, wheels up for sure. Now let's take a quick break. We're going to cover a few more news items for you here before the end of the show. But I wanted to take a break to hit our Discord. If this is your first time listening, you need to know we've got a free Discord. The link is going to be in the show notes. We would love to have you jump on there. It's a great group of guys. I think it's over 100 people in that Discord now. It's ramping up, getting more active every day as people kind of get ready to tune back in for the start of the season. We're reacting to news like the stuff that we're talking about tonight. Everybody's in there kind of giving their opinions on it. People are posting trades, all kinds of stuff. So it's a great community. Would love to have you come join it. It's totally free. And if you've been listening for a while and you're not in there yet, what are you doing? Come on. It's free. Jump in. We want to get to know you. So definitely check out that Discord. And then the last thing I'll hit is just the dynastynerds.com app. They have a great app. They've got a league analyzer tool that really can help you, especially if you're in a lot of leagues, just kind of break everything down and get really good visual aids. They've got a trade calculator, extra podcasts, a film room, all kinds of great stuff. I love Dynasty Nerds and have worked for them for a couple of years now. Highly recommend it. I was paying for it myself before they hired me, and you can get it for 15% off. Use promo code COOP, COOP, dynastynerds.com. Check it out for sure. And with that being said, let's get into the second half of the show. And the next news item that I want us to react to is Cooper Kupp. Looks like he's finally healthy after battling injuries last year. He's going in the 8th round startup ADP in dynasty drafts. And I've even heard that he could be back to being the team's clear number 1 option ahead of Puka now that he's healthy. Are you guys buying that? Do you think he's a value in the 8th round of startups? How are you guys feeling about Cooper Kupp? We'll start with you, Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at my dynasty roster, and it's a tale of two sides of the coin, right? Because if I'm rebuilding or I'm not competing immediately, he's not really a guy I'm too terribly interested in, just based on his age alone and his injury history, right? But if you're a team that can potentially go for the championship, you're a playoff contender, and you can really make a push this year. 8th round startup ADP is a steal for a guy with Cooper Kupp's ability. I mean, I'm looking at some of the guys that are going around him. I mean, Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk. Chris Godwin, Christian Watson. I mean, all really great mid-round targets, but nobody's going to give you the upside that Cooper Kupp's going to give you. I mean, he was a Triple Crown winner for a reason. And if you could get him in the 8th round, I mean, you were doing really, really well for a championship roster.
I agree. If you're in a startup and you're trying to go young or punt season 1, then don't take them. But otherwise, that's tremendous value in my opinion. And I can definitely see a world where, he's the 1A and Puka's 1B now that he's fully healthy. So I can definitely see, and we know that Stafford can support 2 wide receiver 1 kind of seasons. So I'm totally buying into that.
Yeah, it's always hard to buy a 31-year-old in Dynasty, but I totally agree. I think he should be an affordable contender buy for right now, and I do think he will produce this year. So, Jackson, I want to get your thoughts on this one. Rookie tight end Theo Johnson is getting first-team reps for the Giants. Does he make an immediate impact this year? Is he a guy that we should be paying attention to?
I think he's a guy that we should be paying attention to. For the chance that he can make an impact. Tight ends, it always takes these guys, you hear 3 years to develop. Some guys get it done year 1. Sam Laporta got it done year 1. He's not that kind of caliber player. I just want to get it out there right now. When I watch Theo Johnson's film, he's a super athletic tight end. He's really fast, but he's got some downside to him. He's not a super, incredible route runner. He's really athletic, and that's what you'd like to see out of the tight end position. What's going to really set him apart is the Giants have literally nobody to throw the ball to. I mean, they are so decimated, it feels like, on that roster. I mean, you got to look at somebody that's got Theo Johnson's athleticism ability. And, I mean, can he go out there and have 500, 600, maybe even 700 yards receiving and be a borderline tight end 1? I think that's completely possible. So especially at his price tag, I mean, he's going super late in drafts. I'm paying attention to him just based on the fact that, I mean, who do the Giants really have, right? So.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you slightly. I will say that, first of all, I'm not interested in much of anybody from the Giants.
Yeah, no.
I don't think Theo Johnson's a good player. I think he's a combine warrior. I actually prefer Daniel Bellinger, his teammate, who has been in the system for a couple of years, was producing as a rookie before they went and acquired Darren Waller, and is in and of himself. He's also tested very, very well athletically. And so, yeah, if I was going to throw a late dart on either one, I'll take Bellinger over Theo Johnson for me. But let's not bury the lead here. The real guy that's been dominating Giants training camp is Malik Neighbors. Every single day, that guy is torching whoever's guarding him, catching long touchdowns. I mean, it has just been ridiculous how consistent that has been every single day. So Malik Neighbors, if you drafted him, if you have shares, rejoice. If you didn't, that ship has probably sailed. I don't think you're buying him at this point. So, yeah, Malik Neighbors is looking like a stud. Let's move on. We got just a couple of more, just a couple items to cover before we wrap up the show. Next one, Javonte Williams. We talked about him a few weeks ago on our players that could gain the most value or lose the most value this season. And I made the argument that he has some of the most to gain in his second year coming off of that really messy surgery. And he's gone from, rumored to be a cut candidate to the clear RB1, which tells me that all the cut candidate news was fake news. And really, this is kind of what I've expected all along. But yeah, what do you guys think? Is he a buy low candidate? Rupert, we'll throw it to you. Is Javonte Williams somebody that you're buying right now? He's got a 9th round ADP that might be coming up as more people kind of feel more sure that he's the starter. But for now, looking at 9th round ADP, how you feel about Javonte Williams?
Yeah, he's a buy like right now candidate before the coming weeks when I see his stock rising. I agree. The cut candidate stuff was just coach speak to try and motivate them, just kind of garbage talk. There's no way they're going to cut him, in my opinion. I do think that he's probably going to lose some third down usage to Joel McLaughlin. But
which he did
I
last year
think he's
anyway.
going to be the first and second down bell cow. He'll be the guy in the red zone. He's kind of built for it. Bounces off tackles, has tremendous contact balance. And I think he really fits Sean Payton's scheme, kind of in that Mark Ingram role. So I got a couple shares of him this offseason in 2 startups drafts that I did. And I got them so late. It was just tremendous value. I just couldn't pass them up. But this show's reminded me I should probably go out there and try and get some trades done in some weeks.
Throw
I need
some
some
more
running
offers.
backs.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. I don't see Audric Estime as a threat to him at all. I mean, you're talking about a late day 3 pick whose tape I didn't really love that much anyway. So I love Javonte Williams. He got almost 300 touches last year. Fantasy wise, not the greatest season in the world, but I do expect him to be much more efficient with his touches this year, looking much more explosive and back to his old self in his second year coming off that injury. So I agree. He's a buy candidate. He has been for me all offseason. So let's get to our last piece of news here. And according to Patriots news sources, Jalen Polk is one of those all-around players that you want to build your team around. Lots of hype for Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Is this hype that you guys are paying attention to, or is it hype that you guys are ignoring?
I'm gonna be honest. When I put this on the show sheet, I put it on there just for a little humor break for our podcast. I'm not paying attention to that at all. Look, we know who Jalen Polk was when we watched this film. If I believe Cooper, I was in one of our Discord film rooms watching the film with you, and like we got so bored watching his film that we had to like rewind it a few times because like we were missing plays because he just wasn't doing anything special. If this news is anything, I am going out and sending so many offers for Javon Baker that it's humorous. He's far and away the better wide receiver on that roster, and there's not a doubt in my mind that he's going to take over and be better than Jalen Polk is by a mile.
Yeah, so this one interestingly kind of coincides with a lot of the news today has been about Brandon Ayuk. That is he going to get traded to the Browns, or is he going to get traded to the Steelers, or is he going to get traded to the Patriots, which would significantly impact these players that we're talking about. Speaking of news to ignore, breaking, he might get traded. He might not get traded. He might go to this team. He might go to that team. We don't actually know anything. So why are we wasting time speculating about it?
Did you see that video where Christian McCaffrey called him his former teammate?
Yeah, that was interesting. So, I mean, it seems like Brandon Ayuk is probably getting traded, but we don't know where. But anyway, for the sake of this conversation with the Patriots, if Brandon Ayuk is not traded there, I do think that there's room for both Baker and Polk to be successful because there's really nobody else there. There has been a consistent drumbeat for both in camp. And I will say I've been wrong before. Matt Harmon really likes Jalen Polk, which speaks volumes to me because I respect his analysis so much. I have not drafted any shares, and I'm not going out and buying any shares. And I do think it's telling that everything you hear about Jalen Polk is a quote, and everything that you hear about Javon Baker is a clip. So you're seeing.
I'll just say I've seen clips of Jalen Polk, right? It's like 5-yard screens, which tell me absolutely nothing.
Right. And you're just consistently seeing Javon Baker dominate man coverage and snap off his routes and look really technically sound and make some spectacular catches. So, I mean, anybody that's been listening to this show for a while is not going to be surprised to hear us hyping Javon Baker and saying that we think he's better than Polk. We've been beating that drum since way before the draft. But Rupert, I got to hand it over to you. Your guy, Javon Baker. Tell us what you think here.
As the official captain of the Javon Baker fan club, I am ignoring this news about Polk. I can see Gerard Mayo saying this from a perspective of like Polk has that dog. He's like a Heinz Ward kind of player or something like that where he's, blocking a lot, being a team leader. As far as being a high-end fantasy producer, I just don't see it. And I see it all with Javon Baker. He can do everything. And all these quips in preseason is just backing that up. Everything he's doing, just dusting guys at the stem of the route. On his release is everything I saw on tape. The contested catch, the body control. It's just backing up everything. And I was looking around to see if there's any shares that I didn't get of him. And I think all of the shares I didn't get, you got, Cooper. So pretty much every week,
That's true.
I was able to scoop him up.
Yeah, man. Look, I think Polk could be kind of the zone beater and Javon Baker the man beater in terms of if you want to think about it that way. I also really like Pop Douglas out of the slot. I think he's going to earn a lot of targets this year. And especially with Kendrick Bourne kind of being banged up, I could really see those three just taking the wheel and being the three guys, like that young trio being the guys for the Patriots this year. And when they're in 3 wide receiver sets, it's Polk, Baker, and Pop Douglas. So I think there is room for Polk to be somewhat fantasy relevant. But yeah, like you guys said, I also still think Baker's cheaper just because of the draft capital. Like you can go get Baker for cheaper than Polk. So yeah, I still think Baker's a buy if you don't already have him. And hopefully if you've been listening to this show, you already have him. But real quick before we wrap up, Dynasty Dogs in the chat, he said, send Addison for Leggett plus. What do you guys think about that? Do you like that trade scenario? Do you want the Addison side or the Leggett plus side?
I think I'd probably take the Leggett side, just depending on the plus. Like if it's, a second, definitely take that and run. I feel like Leggett has the opportunity to end up being the number one on his team, where Addison, there's just no shot with Jefferson there. Yeah. So I'd probably take the Leggett side.
Yeah, if I can get a second on top of that, I think I would lean the Leggett side, just for what you said, Rupert. I mean, Addison has got to compete with Jefferson. He's got to compete with other guys on that team they're going to take away targets. So, give me the Leggett side, just from upside, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this one. I mean, I don't know if I would do it on a second. I think you might actually be able to get Leggett in a first, because Addison was like a high first last year. He produced as a rookie. He's a young player that a lot of people are excited about. There's a big gap between Addison and Leggett in startup ADP. So I think you may be able to get Leggett and a first for Addison, and I would do that probably. But if it was just a second round pick, I don't know. I liked Addison so much more as a prospect, and he did produce and was a usable, startable fantasy player last year, which I don't know if Leggett ever will be. So it just depends on what the plus is. But I don't know if I agree with you guys on the second, but I would take Addison. I would take Leggett in a first.
What type of car does Leggett drive?
I don't know. Something country, probably a pickup truck.
If he doesn't get in the car and do something stupid, I'll take the Leggett side.
I'm guessing a second to see where you're going there.
I see what you did there now. My guess would be Leggett's driving a pickup truck. I mean, have you heard that guy talk? He's about as country as it gets, man. That guy's driving a pickup truck. But that's going to about do it for tonight. Appreciate you guys listening. If you are new to the show, we really appreciate you guys checking it out. And you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. This show is going to go up audio version on all kinds of platforms after we finish this live show on YouTube. Leave us a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave us a good review if you're listening on a podcast app. That really helps the channel grow. Jackson, Rupert, why don't you tell these guys where they can find you on social media, and we'll wrap out here. Jackson, we'll start with you.
You guys can find me on Twitter at DevyMatt.
And you can find me at Matthew Rupert FF on Twitter.
You can find me at CouchScouts FF on Twitter, and you can find us on YouTube at CouchScouts. So thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you guys next week.